Barbados. The very name brings to mind, pictures of bright blue water, sparkling white sand, and the soft sound of palm trees swaying in a warm Caribbean breeze. It is a gem of the Lesser Antilles, a place many dream of because of its perfect beaches and lively, friendly culture. But behind this perfect picture, there's a story. A history carved into the very heart of the island. It's more than just a beach paradise. The name Barbados hides a past of being a colony and very old roots. Let's find out about it together. This island's name is not just a simple tag on a map, it's a clue, a trail of breadcrumbs leading back through hundreds of years of exploring, taking over, and changing. Its story whispers of forgotten people and the strong forces that shaped the modern Caribbean. To truly understand this island, we have to look past the sunny shores and dig into what its name means. The story begins not with the English who would later claim it, but with Portuguese explorers sailing these unknown waters. These were men on a mission, mapping the huge, unknown open sea of the Atlantic, driven by the promise of money and new lands for their empire. As their ships got close to this small, easternmost Caribbean island, something caught their eye. It was something so special, so easy to remember, that it would give the island its lasting identity. The name they picked came from a simple observation. A first look that would stick for over 500 years, long after their ships had sailed away. The name they gave to this land was Os Barbados. In the Portuguese language, this phrase has a simple yet powerful meaning. The bearded ones. It's a strange and interesting name for an island. Why bearded? What could have possibly made them describe a place of green plants and perfect coastlines like that? This question opens up a fascinating historical puzzle. One with several possible answers that connect us to the island's natural environment and its very first people. The name itself is a mystery waiting to be solved, a window into the world as seen through the eyes of sailors from the 1500s, men who were mapping not just land, but their own ideas of a new world. This trip into the name of Barbados is in fact, a trip into its soul. It takes us back to a time before the big sugar farms, before the British flag was raised over Bridgetown, and even before the island became a popular place for travelers from all over the world. It is a story of how a place gets its name and in turn, how that name becomes a part of who it is. We'll look at the ideas behind this bearded name, trace when different European powers arrived, and see how the name has lasted through hundreds of years of big changes, from being a British colony to a proud and independent country. The story of Barbados is, in many ways, the story of the Caribbean itself. The start of the name Barbados is strongly tied to the Portuguese language. When explorers from Portugal sailed past the island in the 1500s, they named it Os Barbados, which means directly the bearded ones. This was not unusual for explorers back then. They often named new lands based on a clear feature they saw, whether it was a natural landmark, a type of plant, or how the local people looked. The name was a simple, descriptive tag, a way to tell this specific piece of land apart from the many other islands spread across the Caribbean. It was a name born from a first impression, written down in a ship's log and later drawn onto a map. The Portuguese were pioneers of the age of discovery, and their impact on world maps is clear. While they never set up a permanent home on Barbados, their presence in the area was important. They were often on their way to their much bigger and more profitable colony in Brazil, and the Caribbean islands served as important stops for ships to get fresh water and food. It was likely during one of these short stops, or maybe even just sailing by, that the island was seen and named. The name Os Barbados first showed up on Portuguese maps in the 1530s, showing these early, quick visits that would forever define the island's identity. Why the Portuguese and not the Spanish? Well, while Spain was the main colonial power in the Americas, claiming huge areas from Mexico to Peru, Portugal had its own goals. The 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas had, in theory, split the non-European world between the two Spanish and Portuguese powers. While most of the Caribbean was under Spanish control, Portuguese sailors were constantly traveling these waters. Their main focus was on Brazil and the profitable trade routes to Africa and Asia, but their ships were a common sight. It is therefore widely agreed by historians that it was these Portuguese sailors who left the first European language mark on the island, a name that would last longer than their brief presence. The change from Os Barbados to the single Barbados happened slowly, as maps were copied and translated, and as other European powers, especially the English, started to show interest in the area, the name was made simpler. The plural "the bearded ones" became the single Barbados. a smoother, more English-sounding version that was easier to say and write. This language change shows the changing of power in the Caribbean, as English influence began to replace that of the Spanish and Portuguese powers. Yet the main meaning, the reference to the bearded, stayed the same, a permanent echo of that first Portuguese sighting hundreds of years ago, a ghost of a memory kept in a single word. So what exactly were these bearded ones that so captured the Portuguese sailors? There are two main ideas, and both offer an interesting look into the island's past. The first and most widely accepted explanation points not to people, but to a plant, the native Ficus citrifolia, commonly known as the bearded fig tree. This amazing tree is known for its long, hanging roots that grow down from its branches to the ground. From a distance, these thick, stringy roots create a striking look, making the trees seem as if they have long, flowing beards. For sailors seeing the island for the first time, a coastline covered with these unusual bearded trees would have been a truly memorable sight. This plant explanation is strong because it connects the island's name directly to its unique natural landscape. Imagine sailing for weeks across the open ocean, and then seeing an island whose forests seem to be covered in long, beard-like parts. It would have been a clear feature, a perfect simple way to describe the place. The bearded fig tree is not just an old curiosity, it remains an important part of Barbados's nature and history. These trees provided shade and food, and their unique look likely made a deep impression on all who saw them. The name Barbados could therefore be a beautiful and lasting tribute to the island's native plants, a permanent reminder of the natural wonders that first greeted its European visitors. However, there is another idea, more focused on people, that cannot be ignored. Some historians suggest that the name Os Barbados could have referred to the native people of the island. At the time of the first European contact, Barbados was home to Amerindian peoples, likely the Arawaks or the Caribs. It is possible that the men on the island wore beards, or perhaps had a hairstyle or decoration that looked like a beard. If the Portuguese explorers met these people, or even saw them from their ships, their physical appearance could have been the reason for the name. It would have been a way of describing the people who lived on the land. This second idea, while possible, is harder to prove. By the time the English arrived in the 1620s to set up a permanent colony, the island was mostly empty. The native population had been wiped out by diseases brought by Europeans and, more importantly, by cruel slave raids carried out by the Spanish to get workers for their bigger colonies. As a result, very little direct proof of how the Barbadian Amerindians looked and lived still exists. Whether they were bearded or not remains a guess. Yet, the possibility adds a layer of human sadness to the story of the name, reminding us of the lost civilizations that existed before the colonial era changed the Caribbean forever. The first recorded European contact with Barbados happened in the 1530s, a time of intense exploration and growth. While Christopher Columbus had sailed through the Caribbean decades earlier, his trips had missed this easternmost island. It was the Portuguese, as we've said, who likely saw it first while on their way to Brazil. Their visits, however, were short and temporary. They did not see the island as a top priority for setting up a colony. It didn't have the obvious gold and silver that the Spanish were finding in Mexico and Peru, and its important location seemed limited compared to bigger islands like Hispaniola or Cuba. For the Portuguese, Barbados was a landmark, a place to be named and noted on a map before continuing their journey. After the Portuguese, the Spanish also made their presence known in the area. Spanish ships visited the island from time to time throughout the 1500s. Their interest, however, was not in settling but in taking advantage of it. The Spanish Empire had a huge need for workers to labor in its mines and farms on other larger Caribbean islands. Barbados, with its Arawak and Carib populations, became a target for cruel slave raids. Spanish slave traders would come down on the island, capturing its people and forcing them to a life of hard labor elsewhere. These terrible raids, along with the spread of European diseases to which the native people had no protection, led to the complete emptying of the island. This sad part is key to understanding the state of Barbados when the English arrived. By the early 1600s, the island that the Portuguese had named and the Spanish had robbed was basically empty. The original bearded ones, whether they were trees or people, were gone. The once thriving native communities had disappeared, leaving behind only small pieces of their existence for archaeologists to find hundreds of years later. The island had become a quiet, lonely outpost, a natural paradise waiting for its next chapter, but one whose quietness came from immense human suffering. It was a blank slate, but one that had been violently wiped clean, a ghost island in the sun. When the first English ship, the Olive Blossom, landed in 1625, its crew found an island that was, for all practical purposes, empty. They claimed it for King James I of England, unaware of the complex and sad history that had happened before they arrived. They saw only possibility: rich soil, thick forests, and a good location. They did not find native people to conquer or talk with, which made the process of setting up a colony surprisingly simple. This emptiness was a direct result of the brief but destructive encounters with the Spanish and Portuguese, who had named the island and then stripped it of its people, setting the stage for a new colonial power to take hold. The arrival of the English in the 1600s marked the start of a new and clear time for Barbados. In 1627, the first permanent English settlement was set up at what is now Hull Town. These colonists weren't just passing through, they came to stay, to build, and to make money. They officially adopted the name Barbados, which had already appeared on European maps for nearly 100 years. The English didn't feel the need to rename it. The name was already known, and it worked. By making it official in their charters and documents, they cemented the Portuguese legacy into the rules and laws of their new colony, an island they would go on to call Little England. Under British rule, Barbados changed at an amazing speed. The thick forests that once covered the island, including many of the bearded fig trees that may have given it its name, were cut down to make room for farming. At first, the settlers tried to grow tobacco and cotton, but they soon found a much more profitable crop: sugarcane. The sugar revolution in the mid-1600s turned Barbados into one of the richest and most valuable colonies in the British Empire. This huge wealth, however, was built on a foundation of cruel exploitation. The need for workers on the huge sugar farms led to the mass import of enslaved Africans, who were forced to endure terrible conditions. The name Barbados thus became linked with a very structured and deeply unfair colonial society. Life was controlled by the rhythm of the sugar farm, a system that created a small, incredibly rich white plantation owner class and a large, oppressed, black population. The landscape was changed forever, with sugarcane fields stretching from one side of the island to the other, dotted with windmills and the grand houses of the plantation owners. The name, born from a gentle observation of nature, now oversaw a society defined by immense cruelty and hardship. It was the name of a place that produced the white gold that sweetened the tea of an empire, all at an unimaginable human cost. Throughout the long hundreds of years of British rule, the name Barbados stayed the same. It was the name of the colony that developed its own unique assembly, the third oldest in the Commonwealth, and the name of the island that played a key role in the important naval battles between Britain and its European rivals. The name was printed on money, stamped on official letters, and spoken by generations of people, both free and enslaved, who called the island home. It became an inseparable part of the island's identity, a name that saw rebellion, freedom in 1834, and the slow, hard journey towards greater social and political freedom, all under the watchful eye of the British Crown. As Barbados moved through the 1800s and 1900s, its relationship with its name began to change. After freedom, the name Barbados was no longer just the label of a British sugar colony. It became the name of a homeland for a newly freed people. For generations of Afro-Barbadians, the island was the only home they had ever known. They began a long and difficult process of creating a new identity, one that was different from the colonial systems that had for so long oppressed them. The name Barbados started to be filled with new meanings, filled with the strength, creativity, and spirit of its people. It became the flag under which a unique Bajan culture would grow. This new identity was seen in every part of life. The Bajan way of speaking, a musical and expressive mix of English and African language influences, became a strong symbol of national pride. The music of the island, from the old traditions to the lively rhythms of calypso and soca, told the stories of everyday life, struggle, and celebration. The food, a delicious mix of African, British, and Caribbean ingredients, fed a growing sense of community. The name Barbados was now linked with the flying fish and cuckoo, with the exciting energy of the Crop Over Festival, and with the world-famous rum that was made on its shores. The name was being taken back and redefined from within. If you love learning about how countries got their names, hit that subscribe button and join the journey. The story of Barbados shows how a name can change. It began as an outside label, a description given by sailors passing by, but over time it was taken in and filled with the rich cultural history of the people who lived there. The bearded origins, whether referring to trees or people, became a point of historical interest, a story to be told to visitors and passed down through generations. The name itself became a container for national pride, a simple word that held a complex history of pain and endurance, of being controlled, and in the end, of winning. Even after gaining full independence from Britain in 1966, the country proudly kept the name Barbados. There was no movement to change it, no desire to get rid of this last bit of its colonial past. By this point, the name belonged to the people. It was the name of their nation, their sports teams, their art, and their place in the world. It represented a journey from a land of the bearded ones to a modern, independent country. The name had taken in all the layers of its history: the native roots, the Portuguese naming, the British colonization, the horrors of slavery, and the joy of freedom, and had become a strong symbol of the nation's unique and lasting identity. The most recent chapter in the island's journey happened on November 30th, 2021. On this day, Barbados took a huge step, changing from a country with a king or queen to a republic governed by its people. It was a strong statement of self-rule, a final breaking of colonial ties with the British crown. Yet, as the nation celebrated the start of its first president, the name stayed the same. The country became the Republic of Barbados. This decision says a lot about how the island sees its name today. It is not seen as something forced on them by colonizers to be thrown away, but as an important part of its history, a name that has been fully and truly accepted by its people. Today, the name Barbados represents a nation that is confident, looking to the future, and deeply proud of its heritage. It stands for a place that has overcome the darkest parts of its history to become a stable democracy and a leader in the Caribbean region. The origin of the name, the story of the bearded ones, is now a celebrated part of national folk tales. It connects modern Bajans to the very first impressions of their island, linking them to the natural world of the bearded fig tree and the mysterious echoes of its earliest people. The name is a conversation starter, a fun fact, but also a deep reminder of the island's long and layered history. For the people of Barbados, the name is a source of immense pride. It is the name of their home, a place known for its warmth, its friendliness, and the strength of its community. It is the name carried by its global representatives, from the superstar Rihanna to the legendary cricket player Sir Garfield Sobers. The name has come to mean excellence, strength, and a unique Bajan spirit. It is no longer just a geographical label. It is a brand, a promise of quality, and a statement of identity on the world stage. The journey from Barbados to the Republic of Barbados is a testament to the power of a people to take a name and make it their own. So, the next time you hear the name Barbados, think beyond the beautiful beaches and fancy resorts. Remember the bearded fig trees with their long, flowing roots. Think of the Portuguese sailors mapping a new world, the English colonists building a sugar empire, and the enslaved Africans who endured, survived, and ultimately shaped the soul of the nation. The name is a story in itself, a story of nature, of taking over, of survival, and of the triumphant rise of a proud and independent people. It is a name that has been earned, a name that is treasured, and a name that perfectly captures the spirit of this remarkable island nation. Which country name should we explore next? Drop your suggestions in the comments.